Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing, Eastside Jiu-Jitsu, and That's Badass Wood Art. Remember to use promo code CT Pocket for 20% off any one item at that'sbadasswoodart.com, and like and subscribe. We just got our 3,000th subscriber, Miles, so we picked a winner. We did a random generator through our subscriber list, and the winner is Ben Danielson. So Ben, congratulations. Thank you for subscribing. To everybody who subscribed, thank you. We're super grateful for you watching us, and we're going to continue to hopefully do some more giveaways in the future. So stay tuned for those. But Ben, I think I shot you a note on Twitter because I saw you were out there. We need your address to send you that custom Skol piece by That's Badass Wood Art. So Miles and I are here this morning, bright and early. We're recording this at 6 a.m. And we thought we'd address some comments that we've seen in some of the YouTube videos we've posted, as well as the rumor yesterday circulating Vikings Twitter, which is that the Vikings were making calls about moving up very high in the draft for Bryce Young. And I'll read the exact quote here, Miles, and then I'll get your reaction. Tom Pelissero was on the Pat McAfee show, and in talking about trading up for quarterbacks in the Vikings, he said those were all just draft rumors. Half of those are just completely wrong. A lot of the stuff with the Vikings trading up for quarterbacks was proven wrong. Will Levis was sitting there when the Vikings pick came in at 23, and they didn't take him. Pelissero did say, though, that they were making calls about moving up very high in the draft, but my understanding is that it was for one player, and that was Bryce Young, who ended up going number one. So there went any possibility for Minnesota to go get him. What do you think? This is kind of, to me, this reminds me of like when we heard about them wanting to move up for Justin Fields too, but they just didn't pull the trigger.
How so? Like, elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so like,
yeah,
two different regimes. So I'll start there, but there is this like continued sense that like there's going to be a new young quarterback for us to be rooting for. In the front office acknowledges that, whether it was Rick and Zim, whether it is Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell, and for fans who are thinking it's Jaron Hall, I have news for you. It's not Jaron Hall.
There's like a very small chance it'll be
Yes,
Jaron
sure,
Hall.
sure.
Can't say it's not, but there's a very small chance.
Yes, but what do you think about the thought of them moving up potentially at one point, or considering moving up for Bryce Young?
Well, I think to the latter point of what Tom Pelissero said was the like Will Levis note, and you and I had kind of gotten some notes earlier in the heading into the draft that like Will Levis might just not be the guy the Vikings like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously it was made clear when they passed on him at 23. But to be honest, it wasn't surprising. And all the things we had heard and talked about leading up to the draft with quarterbacks, if the Vikings were going to pull the trigger on a quarterback early in the draft, it was going to be for a guy with accuracy was a big point. What was it like? There's a few other things that Kevin O'Connell, I don't have it off the top of my head, but like obviously accuracy was a huge factor.
Playing off script was one.
Playing off script and some of those things that Will Levis doesn't. It's not that he can't get to that point, but I just don't think he fits some of the things that Kevin O'Connell is looking for in his future quarterback to develop. And I think it's made true into that the Vikings could have taken him at 23 without having to move up, move back, do anything. They could have just taken him at 23 and made him their future quarterback, and they chose not to.
Well, and people wanted to make that connection because of Kentucky, right? And Kevin O'Connell knows the coaches at Kentucky, so you'd have the book on Will Levis.
Well, exactly. So Liam Cohen, he was the offensive coordinator for the Rams last year. He was on the Rams staff when Kevin O'Connell was there. So there's a connection there. Liam Cohen was also the offensive coordinator in 2021 when Kevin O'Connell was in LA, but with Will Levis. And so there's that connection, like him, McVay, Kevin O'Connell. So if anybody has the book on Will Levis, it's the Vikings because Kevin O'Connell's connection to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that that's the only reason they didn't take him. It doesn't mean that there was like huge red flags coming from like that side that were like, oh, I just think it could be the type of player that they project Will Levis to be. And so that one was always like made sense to me, and like why they didn't pull the trigger there. I think
Yeah.
for me though, this new regime is different than the Spielman regime in that I fully expect them to be aggressive whenever that time comes and the opportunity comes to go get that future quarterback. And I think people always look at it, well, they didn't do it, so that means they're not aggressive. It's like, no, you have to have the opportunity as well. Like you may be like every team, most teams call to see what the cost would be to move up to do these things, but
Yep.
it's also about having the right opportunity. And like you had said, it sounds like Bryce Young was that opportunity. If he had come, that they would have gone after. And obviously, he went first overall. The Vikings weren't going to be able to move from 23 to 1 in any capacity, especially over the Panthers, where they're moving from 9 when the Bears originally had that pick. So it's one of those situations. I fully expect the Vikings to be aggressive when the time comes. And if Bryce Young was the only guy that they're moving up for, it surprises me a little bit. But I think he's the one guy that has the full blend of accuracy, playoff script, maneuverability in the pocket, like in that Joe Burrow style.
Yep.
Obviously, he's not as big as Joe Burrow, but like I think Bryce Young has that style of play, and I think that definitely is something that's not surprising to me that Kevin O'Connell would covet when you look at what the Bengals are doing and with Joe Burrow and what their offense coordinator came from the Rams as well. So that type of player kind of fits that style. So I could see why Kevin O'Connell really liked Bryce Young, and obviously he's the best quarterback in this draft, at least in my opinion. So I could see that, and so to me it excites me just in the simple fact that I think they're going to make a move to go get a guy. Because I think everybody wants to make this about Kirk Cousins. There's a shelf life with Kirk Cousins, whether it's on Kirk Cousins, whether it's on the Vikings, because we know of his age. That's the biggest part of it, and then obviously contract factors in there as well. But 35 years old this year, he'll be 36 next year. Like that is only going to be a short-term scenario and
Yeah.
solution. And that's just because that's just a natural situation. It's not because the Vikings intentionally want to move on. I don't think it's because Kirk Cousins wants to intentionally leave or any of those things. I think there's just like that timing factor that's hitting there. And so for me, I think seeing the Vikings going after a Jaren Hall in the draft is great because they're like, okay, let's at least find a guy that we think has some of the skill sets we covet, and see if we could develop him into something.
Yeah.
And if that something is backup, bridge starter, long-term starter, like we said at the top of the hour, like top of the show, very unlikely, but those are the best case scenarios. And so you kind of hope he can become someone that stays on your roster as a developmental quarterback over the next few years.
We've talked about it too, at least initially when Jaren Hall was drafted, is that this is also an opportunity for Kevin O'Connell and his staff to teach a young quarterback because they haven't done it yet. At least they've done it in their careers, but like here in Minnesota, collectively as one, they have not done it. So this is going to give them a little bit of an opportunity. I have to ask, like, do you think that next year? I mean, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but next year is supposed to be the cream of the crop when it comes to quarterback prospects. When you have Caleb Williams, you have Drake May, the Texas kid, is it Quinn Ewers or whatever? I can't
Quinn
remember.
Ewers, yeah.
I even
Bo
know
Nix.
Bo Nix is out there.
Yeah.
Is next year the year that this opportunity becomes, reality for the Vikings?
I mean, I would like to think so, just because of the timing. Again, I think if they can
Which, by the
I think
way, if it
yeah.
does happen, I think we should give you a round of applause on this show because I think for the past year and a half, you've always said it's going to be 2024. Like that's going to be the year that they go get that quarterback.
Yeah, I think the timing was. I think in an ideal situation, and this might still happen. I think the Vikings would like Kirk to be here through 2024, and then kind of move. And obviously, right now they can't come to an agreement where that was going to be the case because Kirk wanted that 2025 guarantee as well, and Vikings weren't really budging. So I get both sides of the argument, right? Like, but at the end of the day, I think the 2024 time makes sense for where they're at. I think they want to continue to build this roster up so that when they do bring in a quarterback, it's not them having to continue to rebuild from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over the last couple of years, they've been able to hopefully add that talent, that young talent, to go with the already established veterans that they have, like the Justin Jeffersons and Darisaw, Brian O'Neill, those guys, right? Like they have Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans that we've talked about ad nauseum, Lewisine, Brian Asamoah. Like we have a lot of the names. It's just about can they like continue to grow and progress into a stage where when you plug in that quarterback, which I think no matter what happens from a like defensively, like I'm not worried because I think you could fill holes defensively. I think offensively though, whenever they do plan on bringing that young quarterback in, whoever it ends up being, they're going to be put into a really good situation because of the infrastructure that's been put in place already.
Yeah.
And I think the Vikings are trying to make sure that they have that established continued infrastructure in place. And so like the Jordan Addison being added just helps that future quarterback as well.
Yeah.
To go with Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, all that stuff. Right. And so, yes, I think 2024 makes the most sense now. And I do, like I said earlier, I think aggression is going to be something. I don't think they're just going to like hope, like, again, like we saw Will Levis fell to them at 23. They didn't take him.
Yep.
It's not that they wouldn't take a quarterback. They fell to them. I think though, they want to have that conviction.
They're going to control their own destiny.
Exactly. It's not going to be we hope somebody gets to us.
Yeah.
And we hope the fifth best quarterback falls to us. And I think they're like going to be like, hey, if we like a guy and we think he's the best quarterback, whether it's in the draft or one of the top quarterbacks that they have conviction about, I think they're going to be aggressive to go get that guy because they don't want it to be a question or hope. They want it to be we made this decision because it's best for what we view moving forward.
Yeah, and that's always been at least one of my favorite things about Kwesi thus far is we've seen it with TJ Hawkinson. We've seen it throughout the draft last year too, and this year. He's not afraid to move and go get the guy that he wants.
Yeah.
Amid potential criticisms from media and fans, look what he traded up to go get Andrew Booth, right? Like those types of situations. He was calculated. He was aggressive. And that's what I like about him. Before we answer,
well, real quick, yeah. And the one part I'm curious about is, does Kwesi find a way to add 2024 draft capital?
Like with a Dalvin Cook trade, with the Zadarius Smith trade,
yeah. Yep. Danielle Hunt. We don't know about Danielle Hunter. I don't expect Danielle Hunter to be gone, but those guys, those names are kind of out there, and still in question. And obviously, maybe when June 1st hits, when their contracts can be spread out a little bit more, I think. Those could be things that we see the Vikings try to do. Kwesi's trying to stockpile. He made a trade during the draft that got him a 5th round pick in 2024, which isn't nothing. And I think I say that because I don't think they're going to comp picks. I don't think
they're slated to get any at this point.
No, because of some of the way, because Byron Murphy, Marcus Davenport, and those things, right? But I mean, it is what it is. Like that, they kind of knew that going in. Maybe Dalvin Tomlinson. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. But I think they would like to get a little bit more ammo in that sense so that it makes it easier to move up if they do want to do that. Because the one thing that's hard to do is, like, they can give up future capital. I don't think Kwesi would be afraid to give up a 2025 first.
No, not at all.
Whatever. All those, like, picks that it takes to usually move up high to go get a quarterback. I don't think Kwesi's afraid to do it, but I think he would like to have additional ammo in his back pocket just to like lessen that burden long term. So that's kind of wanted to touch on.
Yeah. One more thing. I was looking just in the sense that maybe this really truly is Kirk Cousins last year and they can't reach a deal to cover 2024. I just took a glance at the free agent list for quarterbacks next offseason. Ryan Tannehill, Jacoby Brissett, Mitchell Trubisky, Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, Sam Darnold, Jameis Winston. You probably don't want to go further down than that, but stopgaps available. I purposely cut it off at Baker Mayfield, so we didn't have to hear from Ryan, but I'll throw it in there. But yeah, potential options for stopgaps if Jaren Hall doesn't develop the way they hope for a stopgap, or they can't reach a deal with Kirk Cousins. So something new we want to do here on Vikings Happy Hour and Climbing the Pocket in general is just try and get some comments from you guys. We see you commenting in our videos, so we want to bring those up and kind of address them because we don't do a whole lot of live shows anymore. So I pulled a few. They're very draft centric because that's kind of where we've been the past few weeks. And we'll start with this one. And the reason I picked this one is just to get Miles' reaction. It's Big Raylin Dad, which that's quite the name, but happy with everybody but Addison and gives a solid B grade. What do you think there, Miles? Because Addison is your guy.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of fans that wanted defense, and my guess is because he didn't want Addison. My guess would be he probably wanted a Deontay Banks or a defensive player. I can understand it. We've talked quite a bit about on the show about why I think going offense was just such an important move, and why I think getting a guy like Jordan Addison just fits this offense and where they can help grow a higher ceiling. And I don't, especially an impactful one, and not that a defensive player can't, but I think wide receiver is just that much more important than most other positions. And I think adding that pair receiver with Justin Jefferson is just so important. I think Addison kind of fits perfectly with what Kevin O'Connell wants to do, and you could see it and hear it from O'Connell. In
He's
those
excited.
draft videos. Like that was their guy. Like whether it was Jackson, I think it was Jackson Smith and Jigba, or it was Jordan Addison. I think those were their top two guys, in my opinion. Just based off kind of what, the way their offense runs, kind of what they want from that second receiver, all those things. I think those two fit the best in what Kevin O'Connell wants to do. And so I think when they were able to get him at 23, it just made the most sense. Again, I understand why folks would be upset or wanted defense, though.
Yeah. I see you kind of looking off screen. If you need to bounce, I can finish the show without you. I know what time of the morning it is for you.
Yeah, I just know kids are getting up here and dogs running around. Again, and I'm sure there's another comment about my kids, and I know I have my kids on the show. One thing I won't do is I won't apologize for like my family being on the show, but I will apologize for like not being on mute more in those situations. But like you'll see my kids on the show. That's just gonna happen. Like I'm a dad. Like that's just I won't apologize for that, but I'll make sure I'm on mute a little bit more.
I just apologize for your mic. That's all.
I'll get one. I know. I've been lazy. I swear I have one. I don't know. I'll get a new mic though. I promise.
We had a couple more comments here. Maybe I'll be wrong, but feel like Roy will be a rotational guy this year, and by the end of the year is playing more than guys like Tonga and Bullard. Maybe I'm too high on him, but think Flores coaches him to be a consistent snap to snap, which is his biggest issue and reason he didn't go a lot higher. I haven't looked into Roy as much. I'm still on Mekhi Blackman and Jay Ward. But do you have any insight to Jacqueline? I messed it up. Jaquelin Roy. And I even made a note on the last show that that's the pronunciation. And it's because it's 6 a.m. But
no, it's all good. I actually, in that situation, I hope that scenario plays out, right? Not just because you want that guy to be good, but I think the guys that he's battling out of against and Bullard and Tonga, those guys are like short-term stopgap depth players. And I think Tonga was a breath of fresh air last year in a defensive line that needed it. But I don't think he's anybody that you're like, he's a long-term solution for our defense. He's not. Like, that's just kind of the lay of the land there. And so as much as I like Tonga, I just don't like, he's not a guy you want to rely on long-term. And Roy is that type of player you hope can become a rotational, consistent player for your defense. And so I think in that scenario, I'm all for it. And I would love to see that because I think Roy has that versatility, which I think is why Brian Flores might have coveted him a little bit more, is he has nose flexibility and that 5-eye, not 3-tech, but defensive end in this defense type of flexibility. And so I think they like that. And I'm hoping he can develop that. And I know heading into 2022, he was he was a highly touted guy heading into the 2022 season. And obviously for this draft, I know some people had him as a first round mock draft early in this time last year. We're saying potential first round pick and all that stuff. So obviously things change, but maybe there's that, and maybe the Vikings see some of that ceiling out of him.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the other thing too, I mean, if we can get anything out of this draft class, that's fantastic, but still hoping to get some more out of even last year's too.
For sure.
Last comment here, and then we'll round this off. They said they're so on the draft, but wasn't really impressed with the quality of the draft to begin with, and then we didn't have quality picks to do. So we did okay by not using next year's draft picks to get any average this year. And I think that was a big thing you brought up even going into it. You want to keep those picks for next year, and that's why you were so hyped even just to get the 5th rounder in 2024. And I think it kind of revolves around what we talked about earlier, but it's having that ammo to potentially go and get aggressive in getting a quarterback of the future.
100%. Yeah, and I'm not a fan of using future capital to move up unless you're doing it for a specific player. So I don't, as much as I like a Caleb Evans, I wasn't as big of a fan of giving up a future fourth last year, like this year, and a fourth last year to go get him. Again, I think a Caleb Evans could be a good player, but I think some of that type of strategy isn't something that I don't think Crazy is going to want to do consistently. But I think if and this year, especially when they only had 5 picks going in, I think not using future capital just to add was, I think quality over quantity was an important aspect this year. And I think they did a good job maneuvering the board as they did, with as few picks as they did. So I was impressed by that. People may not like the picks that came from it. I'm up in the air as well. I have a lot of questions about a lot of the picks as well, but I think the way they maneuvered the board with the little amount that they had, I think they did well.
Yeah, I agree. So, Miles, thank you for joining bright and early this morning. For the fans watching, thank you. Please like and subscribe. We're working on a Mekhi Blackmon breakdown here coming soon. The Vikings have rookie minicamp this weekend, and so a lot more coverage coming up, including Jason and Flip coming back on Thursday night with a show. So stay tuned. Until next time, Skol Vikings.